She was 7 months pregnant, working a double shift and holding herself together by sheer will alone. Her back ached, her ankles were swollen inside her shoes, and she still smiled at every single table she passed because that was the kind of woman Alara Whitmore was. She needed this job more than most people in that diner could imagine. And then a man in a gray suit walked through the door, and 6 quiet bikers in the back booth slowly stopped talking. This is the story of what happened in that diner on a warm Wednesday afternoon in Cloverfield, Tennessee. And by the end of it, you're going to feel something you won't forget quickly. It was the day that made small towns look like postcards. Sunlight pouring through wide diner windows, country music playing low on the radio, the smell of fresh pie and grilled onions drifting through the air at Sunrise Diner on Main Street. Rosemary Bellamy, the 70-year-old owner, had been running this place for 32 years and knew every regular by name and usual order. Truckers, farmers, families passing through on Route 9. They all came here. It was a place that made you feel like the world was still basically decent. On this Wednesday, August 15th, 2024, it was busy and warm and full of comfortable noise. But before we go further, let me tell you about Alara Whitmore, because you need to understand who she was before that afternoon changed everything. 5:30 in the morning, the alarm went off in her studio apartment 3 blocks from the diner. Alara opened her eyes to the same ceiling she'd been staring at for 14 months. The same water stain in the corner. The same crack running diagonally across the plaster like a scar that wouldn't heal. She sat up slowly, one hand supporting her lower back, the other resting on her belly. 7 months along, the baby kicked. He always kicked at this hour like he knew it was time to start the day. On the nightstand beside her bed sat a framed photograph. Her wedding day, June 2011. She was 23 in that photo, wearing a simple white dress from David's Bridal, holding a bouquet of daisies. And standing beside her in his dress blues was Sergeant James Bennett Whitmore, 25 years old, dark hair, strong jaw, eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. He'd been gone for 14 months. Alara touched the frame with 2 fingers the way she did every morning. A ritual, a promise to remember. On the small kitchen counter beneath a stack of unopened mail sat an eviction notice. 10 days. She owed $1,400 in back rent. 2 months. The landlord had been patient, but patience had limits, and those limits had been reached. Beside the eviction notice was a bill from the IVF clinic. $8,200. Outstanding balance, payment plan options available. Please remit payment within 30 days to avoid collection proceedings. She looked at that bill for a long moment. The baby inside her was James's child, conceived 5 months after his death through in vitro fertilization using sperm he'd frozen before his second deployment to Iraq in 2007. It was something they'd talked about sitting in their small living room one night before he left. Just in case, he'd said, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. That's what they taught us. She hadn't understood then. She understood now. James had died on June 15th, 2023. 14 months ago, a drunk driver on Route 43 miles outside Cloverfield. Head-on collision. James was killed instantly. The drunk driver walked away with a broken arm and a 5-year sentence that felt like nothing compared to the life he'd taken. Alara had been lost after that. Completely, utterly lost. For 7 months, she moved through the world like a ghost, working at the diner, coming home, staring at the walls, wondering what the point of any of it was. And then one morning in January 2024, she'd remembered the conversation, the frozen sperm, the choice James had given her. She made the appointment that day. The procedure cost $12,000. She had $3,000 in savings. The clinic offered a payment plan. She signed the papers without hesitation. 2 weeks later, she was pregnant. Now, 7 months later, she was working doubles, 6 days a week, trying to pay for the gift James had left her, trying to keep a roof over her head, trying to survive long enough to bring their son into the world. She got dressed slowly. The Sunrise Diner uniform, black pants that barely fit anymore, white button-down shirt stretched tight across her belly, comfortable shoes that used to be comfortable but now just hurt less than the alternatives. Around her neck on a simple silver chain hung James's dog tags. She never took them off. Sergeant J.B. Whitmore, USMC, 27 Marines. OPOS, no preference. She touched them once before leaving the apartment. Another ritual. The walk to the diner took 12 minutes. The sun was just coming up, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Cloverfield was beautiful in the early morning. Quiet, peaceful, a town where people still waved to strangers and left their doors unlocked. She arrived at Sunrise Diner at 5:55. Rose was already inside, starting the coffee, prepping the griddle. The woman moved with the efficiency of someone who'd been doing this for 3 decades. "Morning, honey," Rose said without looking up. She had short gray hair, kind eyes, and the sort of face that made you think of your grandmother. "You didn't have to come in this early." "I know," Alara said, tying her apron, "but I'm here." Rose looked at her then, really looked at her, took in the dark circles under her eyes, the way she moved careful and slow, like every step cost her something. "Ellie," Rose said quietly, "you don't have to work the dinner shift tonight. I can call in Marcy." Ilara shook her head. "I need the hours, Miss Rose." It was the same conversation they'd had 3 times this week. Rose knew about the eviction notice. She knew about the medical bills. She knew that Alara was barely holding on. But Rose also knew that Alara Whitmore was too proud to accept charity and too stubborn to quit. So Rose just nodded and handed her the coffee pot. The morning rush started at 6:30. Construction workers, early shift factory employees, the usual crowd. Alara moved between tables with practiced efficiency, one hand occasionally resting on her belly when she thought nobody was watching. She smiled at every customer, refilled coffee before they asked, remembered orders without writing them down, and if her back screamed with every step, if her ankles throbbed inside her shoes, if exhaustion pulled at her like weights tied to her limbs, she never let it show. That defined who Alara Whitmore was. By noon, the morning crowd had thinned out. Ilara was refilling salt shakers when she glanced at the corner booth, the big one that could seat 8 people comfortably. It was empty now, but she paused when she saw it. That booth, that specific booth. She remembered the night James had proposed. April 2010. She'd been working the evening shift just like tonight. He'd come in wearing jeans and a flannel shirt, nervous as hell, and asked if she wanted to sit with him on her break. She'd said yes. He'd ordered 2 slices of apple pie. When hers arrived, there was a ring sitting on top of the whipped cream, a simple silver band with a small diamond. "I'm not good with words," he'd said, "but I love you, Ellie, and I want to spend whatever time we get making you happy. Will you marry me?" She'd said yes before he finished the sentence. Standing there now, 7 months pregnant and 14 months a widow, Alara felt the memory wash over her like cold water. She touched the corner of the booth with one hand, barely aware she was doing it. Rose noticed. She always noticed. The older woman walked over and stood beside Alara for a moment, saying nothing. Sometimes silence was the kindest thing you could offer. "He was a good man," Rose said finally. "The best," Alara whispered. Rose squeezed her arm gently and walked back to the counter. Alara took a breath, steadied herself. There were tables to serve, bills to pay, a child to bring into this world. She didn't have time for grief right now. Grief was a luxury she couldn't afford. She went back to work. At 12:05, she heard the motorcycles. 6 of them. The sound rolled through Cloverfield like distant thunder, deep and rhythmic. Alara glanced out the window and saw them pull into the parking lot. Big bikes, Harleys mostly, chrome gleaming in the midday sun. The riders dismounted slowly, stretching road-stiff muscles. They wore leather vests over long-sleeved shirts despite the August heat. The vests had patches on the back. Iron Riders, MC Nashville, chapter bound. Alara had seen motorcycle clubs come through before. Cloverfield sat on Route 9, a popular road for weekend rides. Most of them were fine, quiet, respectful, ordered their food, left good tips, and rode on. These 6 looked like that sort. They walked into the diner in a loose group, not loud, not drawing attention. Just men coming in for lunch after a long ride. The one in front was older, 60, maybe 65. Gray at the temples, weathered face, quiet in a way that only came from men who'd seen real things and stopped needing to talk about them. He scanned the diner with eyes that missed nothing, then headed for the large corner booth. The same booth Alara had been standing beside 10 minutes ago. The 6 of them filled it without crowding. They settled in with the ease of people who'd ridden together for years. Brothers maybe not by blood, but by something deeper. Alara grabbed menus and walked over. Afternoon, gentlemen, she said, setting down 6 menus. Can I start you off with some coffee? The older man in the center looked up at her. His eyes were gray-blue, clear and direct. He took in her name tag, her face, her condition in one quick glance. Coffee would be great, ma'am, he said. His voice was low, gravelly. Black for all of us. Coming right up, she brought the coffee pot and 6 mugs. As she poured, she could feel the older man watching her. Not in a creepy way, not the way some men looked at women. This was different, like he was seeing something he recognized. She finished pouring and stepped back. I'll give you a few minutes to look over the menu. Thank you, ma'am, the older man said. She walked back to the counter. Rose leaned over. You okay, honey? I'm fine, Ilara said. Just tired. Rose didn't look convinced, but she didn't push. The 6 bikers ordered lunch. Burgers mostly. The meatloaf special. Nothing fancy. They ate quietly, talking in low voices that didn't carry beyond their table. They weren't rowdy, they weren't drawing attention. They were just 6 men having a meal. But the older one, the one sitting in the center, he kept watching Ilara. Not constantly, not obviously, but every few minutes his eyes would track her as she moved between tables. He noticed things, the way her hand went to her lower back when she thought no one was looking, the way she took a breath before approaching a table like she was gathering herself, the slight tremor in her fingers when she refilled water glasses, and he noticed the dog tags around her neck. At one point, he leaned over and said something to the youngest rider, a man in his late 20s with dark hair and sharp eyes. The young man glanced at Ilara, then back at the older rider. He nodded slowly. Ilara didn't see any of this. She was too busy trying to get through her shift. At 12:45, a black Mercedes pulled into the parking lot. The diner didn't go quiet when the man in the gray suit walked through the door. It went careful. There's a difference. Quiet is the absence of noise. Careful is when noise continues but changes pitch slightly. When conversations don't stop but become slightly less free. People who knew Victor Castellano knew to make that adjustment automatically. He was 53, well-dressed in a charcoal gray suit that cost more than most people in Cloverfield made in a month. Silver hair brushed back in the easy confidence of a man who'd spent decades never being told no. He walked in with 2 men behind him, younger, also suited, men whose job description involved standing nearby and looking like they had no sense of humor. Victor chose a booth near the center of the diner, not the corner where the bikers sat, but close enough. Rose came out from behind the counter herself to take his order. She moved with a tight smile, the expression of someone performing a courtesy they hadn't chosen. Victor ordered without looking at the menu. Steak, medium rare, side salad, iced tea. Rose wrote it down and walked back to the kitchen, her jaw set. Ilara knew who Victor Castellano was. Everyone in Cloverfield knew. He ran 3 legitimate businesses in the county, a car dealership, a property management company, a regional logistics firm. He also ran things that didn't appear on any business license, and most people understood that without saying it directly. 5 years ago, he'd bought the building that housed Sunrise Diner. Rose had been paying him $800 a month ever since. Not rent, protection, because that was how men like Victor operated. 3 weeks ago, Ilara had learned that Victor also owned her apartment building. Through an LLC, through shell companies and legal structures designed to hide ownership. But it all traced back to him. She didn't know if he knew she was James's widow. She didn't know if he cared. All she knew was that she had 10 days to come up with $1,400 or she'd be homeless. Rose brought Victor his iced tea. He didn't thank her. Ilara stayed behind the counter hoping someone else would get assigned to his table. But Rose looked at her and gave a small nod. It was her section. She took a breath, gathered herself, and walked over. Good afternoon, sir, she said, setting down his silverware. Your steak will be out shortly. Can I get you anything else? Victor looked up at her. He had cold eyes that assessed value and found most things lacking. He looked at her face, then her name tag, then her belly. You're new, he said. I've been here 8 months, sir. He smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. 8 months, and how far along are you? Ilara's jaw tightened slightly. It was a personal question, invasive, but she kept her voice even. 7 months. He tilted his head, still smiling. Husband around. The question hit like a slap. She felt her chest constrict, felt the familiar ache of grief that never quite went away. He passed away, she said quietly, 14 months ago. Victor nodded slowly like he was processing information rather than acknowledging a loss. Shame, he said, that smile again. Alara felt something cold settle in her stomach, but she kept her face neutral. I'll check on your order, she said and turned to go. She walked back to the counter, her heart pounding. She didn't know why that interaction felt wrong. It wasn't what he'd said. It was how he'd said it. Like he was testing something on, like he'd found a pressure point and was noting it for later. Rose was watching from the kitchen window. She'd seen the whole thing. Her face was tight. You okay, honey? She asked when Alara came back. I'm fine, Alara said. But she wasn't. At the corner booth, the older biker had heard every word. The acoustics in Sunrise Diner carried sound in strange ways. The corner booth had a clear line of sight to the center of the room, and sound traveled. Cole Raymond Kincaid had heard the entire exchange. He set his coffee cup down without making a sound. Across from him, Dalton Mercer had gone still. The younger man's jaw was tight, his hands flat on the table. Cole gave him a single look, a look that meant not yet. Dalton settled back, but his eyes stayed on Victor Castellano's table. Cole had been riding for 40 years. He'd been president of the Iron Riders Nashville chapter for 15. He'd done 2 tours in Iraq, buried more friends than he could count, and learned long ago that the loudest men in the room were rarely the most dangerous. The dangerous ones were quiet, controlled, the ones who smiled while they hurt you. Victor Castellano was that sort of man. Cole had known men like him in Iraq, men who used power the way other people use tools, casually, without thought for the damage they caused. And he'd just watched one of those men make a pregnant widow uncomfortable in a diner in small-town Tennessee. Cole looked at Alara as she walked back to the counter, saw the way she held herself, the careful composure, the smile she put back on her face before approaching the next table. And he saw the dog tags hanging around her neck. He'd noticed them earlier, military dog tags, Marines from the look of them. He couldn't read the name from this distance, but he didn't need to. A pregnant widow, alone, working herself to exhaustion, wearing her husband's tags like armor. Cole knew that look. He'd worn it himself a long time ago. He leaned over to Dalton and said something in a voice too low to carry. Dalton glanced at Alara, then back at Cole. His eyes widened slightly. Cole nodded once. Dalton sat back, his expression shifting from anger to something else, something like understanding. Over the next 20 minutes, Victor Castellano did what men like him do when they decide someone is a safe target. He sent his steak back, said it was overdone. Rose took it back to the kitchen, her face impassive. The cook, a man named Eddie, who'd been working at Sunrise for 12 years, looked at the steak. There's nothing wrong with this, he said. I know, Rose replied. Just make him another one. The second steak came out 10 minutes later. Alara brought it to the table, set it down carefully. Victor cut into it, took one bite, and shook his head. Now it's underdone, he said. Alara stood there for a moment. She knew what this was. She'd seen it before. This wasn't about the food. This was about power, about seeing how far he could push before someone pushed back. I'll have Eddie cook you a new one, sir, she said evenly. You do that, sweetheart, Victor said. She hated that word. Sweetheart, said with that particular inflection. Like she was a child, like she was nothing. But she took the plate back to the kitchen. Rose was waiting. He's doing this on purpose, Rose said quietly. I know. You don't have to keep serving him. I'll take over. Alara shook her head. I can handle it. Rose looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. The third steak came out. Perfect. Medium rare, just as ordered. Alara brought it to the table with a fresh side salad and a polite smile. Victor cut into it, chewed slowly, then nodded. Better, he said. See, that wasn't so hard. His 2 companions smiled, not because it was funny, because that was their job. Alara stood there, hands clasped in front of her, waiting to see if there would be anything else. Victor looked up at her. You know, sweetheart, you should smile more. You've got a pretty face when you're not looking so serious. The other customers in the diner kept eating, kept talking. But the conversations had that careful quality again. Alara's smile didn't waver. Is there anything else I can get for you, sir? That's all for now. She walked away, back straight, head up, hands steady. But in the corner booth, Cole Kincaid saw what others didn't. He saw the slight tremor in her fingers as she refilled the coffee pot. He saw the way she took a breath before approaching each table like she was preparing herself, gathering her strength. He recognized that too. He'd watched people do it in places far more dangerous than a Tennessee diner. You develop a tolerance for things you should never have to tolerate because tolerating them feels safer than the alternative. And sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. 40 minutes later, Alara brought Victor his check. She set it down on the edge of the table far enough away that he'd have to reach for it. "Thank you for coming in," she said. "Have a great afternoon." She turned to go. Victor reached out and closed his hand around her wrist, not aggressive enough to be undeniable, but firm enough to be deliberate. Alara froze. Every muscle in her body went rigid. "I wasn't done talking," Victor said. His voice was calm, almost friendly, but his grip on her wrist was tight. Alara looked down at his hand, then she looked up at him, and she said clearly and quietly the words she'd been taught in a self-defense class years ago. "Please let go of me." He didn't. He said something to his two companions that made them smile, something Alara didn't quite hear over the roaring in her ears. And then when she pulled her arm back, trying to free herself, Victor Castellano did something that changed everything. He slapped her. Not hard enough to knock her down, not hard enough to leave a bruise that would last more than a day, but hard enough to make a sound that cut through every conversation in that diner like a blade. Hard enough that the table of kids near the window went completely silent. Hard enough that Rose made a sound behind the counter, a sharp intake of breath that she immediately swallowed. The diner went so quiet you could hear the ceiling fan turning overhead. Alara stood there, one hand going to her cheek, her eyes wide with shock. And then from the corner booth, 6 chairs moved back from the table simultaneously. Not rushed, not scrambled. Moved back with the specific deliberateness of men who had spent years learning the difference between reaction and response. Cole Raymond Kincaid stood up first. He was not a physically intimidating man in the way action movies define intimidating. He was not the largest person in the room. He was 61 years old, 5'10", maybe 170 pounds. But he stood in a way that took up exactly the space he was entitled to, and he walked toward Victor Castellano's table like a man who'd already decided what he was going to say and had no interest in being talked out of it. The 5 others fanned out without instruction, not surrounding the table, just present, visible, unmistakable. Garrett Thornton, 58, with arms like oak branches and hands scarred from 30 years of mechanic work. Reverend Silas Vaughn, 64, who'd been an army chaplain and still carried himself like a soldier. Jackson Hayes, 47, electrician, wiry and quick with eyes that never stopped moving. Wesley Palmer, 52, former combat medic who'd seen enough violence to last 3 lifetimes. And Dalton Mercer, 29, the youngest, who'd come back from Iraq with ghosts in his eyes and found a family in the Iron Riders. They didn't say anything. They just stood there. Victor looked up. For the first time since he'd walked into Sunrise Diner, his smile was not fully in place. Cole stopped 2 feet from the table. He looked at Victor Castellano for a moment without speaking. The silence stretched. In that silence, people at nearby tables pulled out their phones. Then Cole spoke, quietly, calmly, loud enough for the people at the nearest tables to hear, but no louder than necessary. "You just put your hands on a pregnant woman in front of witnesses." That was all. No threat, no raised voice, just a statement of fact being entered into a record. Victor stared at him. His 2 companions looked at the 5 bikers standing at various points around them and made rapid recalculations. "You need to walk away, old man," Victor said. His voice had an edge now. Cole didn't move, didn't blink. "We'll wait," Cole said, "for the police." Behind the counter, Rose already had her phone to her ear, speaking in a low, deliberate voice to the 911 dispatcher. Victor Castellano stood up slowly, and when he stood, he found himself looking at a room that had completely changed. 4 phones out at surrounding tables, all recording, a diner full of people who'd been looking at their plates 5 minutes ago and were now looking directly at him. Rose Bellamy on the phone, her voice steady as she gave the address to emergency services. And 6 men who were not going anywhere. Victor understood math. It was how he'd built everything he had. He understood when a calculation had turned against him. He straightened his jacket, smooth, controlled, Like this was all just a minor inconvenience. He looked at Cole, looked at the phones, looked at Alara, who was standing near the counter, now Rose's hand on her shoulder, watching him with an expression that was no longer afraid. "This isn't over," Victor said quietly. Only Cole was close enough to hear. Then he walked out of a Sunrise Diner with his two men behind him, got into his Mercedes, and drove away. The diner exhaled. Dalton was the first one to Alara's side. "Ma'am, are you okay?" he asked. "Do you need a doctor?" Alara shook her head. Her hand was pressed to her cheek, but she was steady. "I'm okay," she said. Rose wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Sit down, honey, please." Alara sat at the counter. Rose brought her water and ice wrapped in a clean towel. Cole came to stand nearby, not hovering, just present. "Thank you," Alara said, looking up at him. Cole nodded once. "You should sit for a while. Take your time." His voice was gentle, gentle in a way that came from experience, from knowing what it felt like to hold yourself together when everything inside was falling apart. Alara pressed the ice to her cheek and tried not to cry. She'd been holding it together for 14 months, working double shifts, paying bills she couldn't afford, carrying a child into a world that felt too hard and too cruel. And she'd done it all without breaking, because breaking felt like giving up, and she couldn't give up because James wouldn't have given up. But sitting there in Sunrise Diner with ice on her face and 6 strangers standing between her and the man who'd hurt her, something inside Alara Whitmore finally cracked. Not broke, just cracked. Enough to let some of the pressure out. The police arrived 18 minutes later. Chief Michael Brennan and Deputy Rodriguez. They walked in, looked around, took in the scene. Chief Brennan's face was carefully neutral. He knew Victor Castellano. Everyone knew Victor Castellano. The man donated $15,000 a year to the police department's community outreach program. Had his name on a plaque in the station lobby. But there were 4 phones out, and people were still recording, and this was going to be complicated. Rose met them at the door, explained what happened, pointed to the table where it had occurred. Deputy Rodriguez, younger and less invested in maintaining relationships with donors, started taking statements immediately. He spoke to Alara first. "Ma'am, can you tell me what happened?" Alara, ice still pressed to her face, told him, calm, clear, factual. The deputy wrote it all down. Then he spoke to the 4 people who'd recorded video. They showed him their phones. The footage was clear, undeniable. Victor grabbing Alara's wrist, Alara asking him to let go. The slap. All of it. Deputy Rodriguez looked at Chief Brennan. The chief's jaw was tight. "We'll need to speak to Mr. Castellano," Rodriguez said. "I'll handle it," Brennan replied. The deputy didn't look satisfied, but he nodded. Before they left, Rodriguez turned to Cole. "You and your friends, you didn't touch him?" "No, sir," Cole said. "We just stood there, waited for you." Rodriguez nodded. "Good. Keep it that way." After the police left, the diner slowly returned to normal. Customers finished their meals. The lunch rush wound down. But people kept looking at the corner booth, at the 6 bikers who were sitting back down, returning to their interrupted meal. And they looked at Alara, who was still sitting at the counter, Rose hovering nearby like a protective mother. Cole walked over, stood at a respectful distance. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "may I ask you something?" Alara looked up at him. His eyes were kind, sad somehow, like he'd seen things that had cost him something permanent. "Yes, sir," Cole hesitated, then nodded toward the dog tags hanging around her neck. "Those tags," he said. "May I ask who they belong to?" Alara's hand went to them automatically. She held them for a moment, feeling the worn metal under her fingers. "My husband," she said quietly, "Sergeant James Bennett Whitmore. Marines, 2 tours in Iraq." She paused, swallowed. "He passed away 14 months ago." Cole went very still, a stillness that people around him noticed. Dalton, sitting at the booth, looked over. So did Rose. Cole's voice when he spoke was barely above a whisper. "James Whitmore," he said, 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines. Alara's eyes widened. "Yes. Did you know him?" Cole was quiet for a long moment. Behind him, the other 5 riders had gone silent, listening. "Ma'am," Cole said slowly, "on November 23, 2007, outside Fallujah, my Humvee convoy hit an IED. The vehicle flipped and caught fire. I was trapped inside." He paused. Corporal James Whitmore was on foot patrol 200 meters away. He ran into the kill zone while rounds were still coming in. He pulled me out of that burning vehicle while the insurgents were still shooting. Elara's breath caught. I was medevaced to Germany, Cole continued. Spent 3 weeks in the hospital with burns and shrapnel wounds. By the time I was stable enough to ask about the men who saved me, Corporal Whitmore had rotated back to the States. I lost track of him. Cole's eyes were wet now. I've been looking for James Whitmore for 17 years. The diner had gone quiet again. But this was a different quiet. Elara stared at Cole Kincaid, at this stranger who just walked into her life and turned it sideways. He never talked about it, she whispered. He never told me. That sounds like him, Cole said. That sounds exactly like him. And then Elara started to cry. Not from the slap, not from Victor Castellano, not from the exhaustion or the bills or the weight of 14 months of grief. She cried because for the first time since James died, she felt like he was still here, still reaching across time and distance to protect her, to send help when she needed it most. Cole stood there not moving, just present, letting her cry. Rose wrapped an arm around her shoulders. And in the corner booth, 5 bikers sat in silence, understanding something profound had just happened. Something bigger than a slap in a diner. Something about debts that transcend death and promises that outlive the people who make them. Of all the diners on all the roads, on all the days, Cole Raymond Kincaid had walked into the one place where the widow of the man who saved his life was working a double shift to support herself and her unborn child. Some people call that coincidence. Cole Kincaid didn't believe in coincidence. He believed in debts. And he believed that some debts don't expire just because the person you owe them to is gone. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows of Sunrise Diner, casting long shadows across the black and white checkered floor. Elara sat at the counter, her coffee growing cold in front of her, while Rose hovered nearby with the protective instinct of a woman who'd seen too many people get hurt and not enough people stand up for them. Cole Kincaid had returned to the corner booth with his 5 brothers. They ate in silence, but it was a different silence now. Purposeful, like men who just made a decision and were letting it settle. Deputy Rodriguez had left 20 minutes ago, promising to file a full report. Chief Brennan had said less, his face carefully blank, as he wrote notes that everyone suspected would go nowhere. But the videos were already out there. 4 different angles, 4 different phones, already uploading to Facebook and Twitter, and whatever other platforms people used to share things they thought the world should see. You couldn't unring that bell. Elara touched her cheek. The ice had reduced the swelling, but she could still feel the imprint of Victor Castellano's hand. Not the physical sensation. That would fade, but the other part, the violation, the reminder that there were men in this world who believed they could do whatever they wanted to whoever they wanted and the world would just look away. Except this time the world hadn't looked away. 6 men had stood up. She looked over at the corner booth. Cole was drinking coffee, his weathered hands wrapped around the mug. He caught her looking and gave her a small nod. Not pity in his eyes, something else. Recognition, maybe. Like he'd been where she was and knew what it cost to hold yourself together. Rose leaned in close. Honey, why don't you go home? I'll cover the rest of your shift. I can't afford to miss the hours, Elara said quietly. I'll pay you anyway. Elara shook her head. That's charity, Miss Rose. And I don't take charity. Rose sighed. It was an argument they'd had before. Elara Whitmore had her pride, and that pride had sharp edges that cut both ways. Then at least take a break, Rose said. Sit in the back for a while. Breathe. Elara nodded. That she could do. She walked toward the kitchen, past the corner booth where the Iron Rider sat. As she passed, Dalton Mercer looked up. Ma'am, he said softly, I just want to say what you did back there, standing up to him, that took guts. Elara paused. I didn't stand up to him. I just asked him to let go. That's standing up, Dalton said. Trust me. There was something in his eyes, a shadow, something that came from experience with bullies and violence and the long road back from both. Elara managed a small smile. Thank you. She continued to the back room, a small space with a table, 2 chairs, and a refrigerator that hummed too loud. She sat down and put her head in her hands. For 14 months she'd been running, working, moving, doing anything to avoid being still, because being still meant feeling, and feeling meant breaking, and she couldn't afford to break. But sitting there in the back room of Sunrise Diner with her face still stinging and her whole body exhausted, Alara let herself feel it. The grief, the fear, the overwhelming weight of trying to survive alone. She cried quietly, one hand on her belly, feeling the baby move inside her. James's son, their son, the last piece of the man she'd loved more than anything in this world. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered to the empty room. "I don't know if I'm strong enough." The baby kicked, hard, like he was answering. She laughed through her tears. "Okay, message received." Out in the diner, Cole pushed his empty plate away and looked at his brothers. "We're staying," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. Bull Thornton, the mechanic with hands like catcher's mitts, nodded slowly. "How long?" "Long as it takes." Reverend Silas Vaughn leaned forward, his gray beard freshly trimmed, his eyes sharp despite his 64 years. "What's the play, Cole?" Cole was quiet for a moment. He looked at the back room where Alara had disappeared, then at Rose, who was watching them with cautious hope. "James Whitmore saved my life 17 years ago," Cole said. "Pulled me out of a burning vehicle while people were trying to kill us. I never got to thank him. Never got to tell him what that meant." He paused. "His widow is 7 months pregnant, working double shifts, about to be evicted. And she just got slapped by a man who thinks he owns this town." Another pause. "We help her, the way James would have helped any of us. Quiet, practical, no speeches, no drama. We just do what needs doing." Jackson Hayes, the electrician, grinned. "I like it. What needs doing first? First we find out what her situation is. Bills, housing, medical. Whatever it is, we figure out how to help without making her feel like charity." "That's going to be the hard part," Doc Palmer said. He'd been a combat medic in Iraq, seen too many blown-apart bodies, and learned that sometimes the wounds you couldn't see were the ones that killed you. "Woman like that has pride, won't take a handout." "Then we don't give her a handout," Cole said. "We give her what her husband would have given her if he was still here. We frame it that way, a debt being paid, brother helping brother." Dalton nodded slowly. "What about the suit, Castellano?" Cole's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "We don't go looking for him, but we don't hide either. We stay visible. We make it clear that she's not alone. Men like that, they're predators. They hunt the vulnerable. Well, she's not vulnerable anymore. She's got 6 brothers watching her back." "Could get messy," Bull said. "Man like that doesn't like being embarrassed." "I know." "Could come back at us." "I know." "Could get dangerous." Cole smiled. It was a thin smile, one that didn't reach his eyes. "Brother, I got blown up in Fallujah and spent 3 weeks in a German hospital, wondering if I'd ever walk again. I buried my son in 2007 and my wife in 2015. I've been riding with the Iron Riders for 15 years, and I've seen men try to intimidate us before." He leaned back. "Victor Castellano doesn't scare me, and he sure as hell doesn't scare us." The 5 other men nodded. It was settled. Rose came over to the booth. She'd been listening, not even pretending otherwise. "You boys serious about helping Ellie?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," Cole said. Rose studied him for a long moment. She'd been running this diner for 32 years. She'd seen a lot of people come through, lots of promises made, fewer kept. But there was something about Cole Kincaid, something solid. "She owes $1,400 in back rent," Rose said quietly. "Her landlord just sold the building to one of Victor's shell companies. She's got 10 days to pay, or she's out." Cole's jaw tightened. Of course he did. "She's also got medical bills, IVF clinic, 8,000 outstanding, payment plan, but she's behind." "IVF," Dalton asked. Rose nodded. "James froze his sperm before deploying. After he died, Ellie decided to go through with it. Baby she's carrying is his. Last piece of him she's got." The table went quiet. "Jesus," Bull whispered. Cole closed his eyes for a moment, opened them. "Anything else?" "Cars falling apart, transmissions going, brakes are shot. She can't afford to fix it, can't afford to replace it." "We can fix that," Bull said immediately. "What kind of car?" 2012 Honda Civic." Bull nodded. "Easy. I can have that running smooth in a day. Parts will cost maybe $1,500. Labor's free." "I'll cover the parts," Cole said. Rose looked at him. That's a lot of money, honey. James Whitmore gave me 17 extra years of life. I think I can spare $1,500 for his widow's transmission. Rose's eyes were wet. She nodded and walked away before anyone could see her cry. Ilara came out of the back room 20 minutes later. Her eyes were red, but she'd composed herself. Put the mask back on. The smile. The strength. She went back to work. Cole watched her move between tables, refilling coffee, taking orders, laughing at some joke a trucker made, even though you could see it cost her something to laugh right now. That strength wasn't loud. It was quiet. Strength that got up every morning even when staying in bed felt impossible. Strength that smiled at customers even when your face still hurt from being slapped. Strength that kept going because stopping meant giving up, and giving up meant admitting that maybe you couldn't do this alone. And Ilara Whitmore wasn't ready to admit that yet, but she wouldn't have to do it alone much longer. At 3 o'clock, the Iron Riders paid their bill. Cole left a $100 tip on a $40 tab. When Rose tried to protest, he just shook his head. For Ellie, he said quietly. They walked out to their bikes, but they didn't leave. Instead, they regrouped in the parking lot. Bull, you and Hayes go price out the parts for that Honda, Cole said. Find out what needs doing and what it'll cost. We fix it right, not half-assed. Bull nodded. On it. Doc, you know anybody at the VA hospital who handles widow benefits? Yeah, Dr. Patricia Nguyen in obstetrics. She's good people. Works with military families. Set up a meeting. See what Ellie qualifies for. Medical coverage, survivor benefits, anything that might help. Doc pulled out his phone. I'll call her now. Rev, you still run that ministry fund, the one for veterans' families? Reverend Silas nodded. We've got about 12,000 in it right now, all donations. Can we access it for Ellie? That's exactly what it's for, Cole. I'll write a check today. Make it anonymous. We don't want her feeling like charity. How do we explain it then? Cole thought for a moment. Tell her it's from a veterans relief fund, which it is. She doesn't need to know which veteran specifically. Silas smiled. I like the way you think. Dalton, you're with me. We're going to do some research on Victor Castellano. Find out what he owns, who he's connected to, what leverage we might have if this gets ugly. Dalton's eyes lit up. The kid had been a signals intelligence specialist in Iraq. He knew how to dig. Where do we start? He asked. County Records Office. Then we call some people. See what we can find out about our friend in the gray suit. They split up. Bull and Hayes headed to the auto parts store. Doc made phone calls. Reverend Silas drove to his church to access the ministry fund, and Cole and Dalton headed to the county courthouse. The records office was in the basement of a building that had been old when Cole was born. Fluorescent lights, filing cabinets that probably dated back to the 1970s. A clerk who looked like she'd been there even longer. Help you, she asked without looking up from her computer. Yes, ma'am, Cole said. We're looking for property records, business filings, anything public on a Victor Castellano. The clerk looked up then. Her eyes narrowed slightly. You're not the first person to ask about him this month, she said. Who else asked? Can't tell you that. Privacy. Cole nodded. Fair enough. Can you tell us what's public record? The clerk sighed. I can tell you he owns a lot of property in this county. Residential, commercial. Most of it through LLCs and shell companies. Makes it hard to track. But not impossible. She smiled. It was a small smile, but it had teeth. Not if you know where to look. She pulled up her computer and started typing. After a moment, she turned the monitor so they could see. Castellano owns 38 properties in Cloverfield County, apartment buildings mostly, a few commercial spaces, all owned through 6 different LLCs. But if you cross-reference the registered agents and tax IDs, they all trace back to him. Dalton leaned in, studying the screen. He owns almost 40% of the rental market in this county. More like 50% if you include the properties he manages but doesn't technically own. Cole felt something cold settle in his chest. So he controls housing for half the county. Pretty much. And he's not a generous landlord, if you know what I mean. I think I do. The clerk printed out the records, handed them to Cole. You didn't get these from me, she said. Cole nodded. Thank you, ma'am. Whatever you're planning, be careful. Victor Castellano has friends in this county. Judges, politicians, police. Noted. They left the courthouse with a folder full of documents and a clearer picture of what they were dealing with. Dalton whistled low. This guy's a slumlord with connections. That's a bad combination. Yeah. So what's the play? Cole looked at the papers, thought about Alara, thought about James Whitmore running into a kill zone to pull a stranger out of a burning vehicle. We help Ellie. Everything else is secondary. And if Castellano comes at us, Cole's expression was grim. Then we deal with it. By 5 o'clock, they'd regrouped at a motel on the edge of town. Motel 6, clean enough, cheap enough. They'd rented 3 rooms. Bull had news first. Civic needs a new transmission, brake pads and rotors, 2 new tires and an oil change. Parts will run about 1,600. I can do the work tomorrow in the diner parking lot. Take me about 4 hours. Do it, Cole said. Doc had news next. Talk to Dr. Nguyen at the VA. Ellie qualifies for full prenatal care through the VA health system. Free. She just needs to apply. Also qualifies for survivor benefits through the DOD, about $1,200 a month. She hasn't applied for those either. Why not? Dalton asked. Pride probably, or didn't know, or both. A lot of military widows don't know what they're entitled to. The system doesn't exactly advertise. Cole nodded. Can you help her apply? Already set up an appointment for Friday, if she'll come. She will. Reverend Silas had the Veterans Fund check. $12,000. Made her out to Alara Whitmore. Anonymous donor. This'll cover the back rent and the medical bills, Silas said, with some left over for whatever else she needs. Cole looked at the check for a long moment, then at his brothers. We're doing this right, he said quietly. We're not just throwing money at the problem. We're making sure she has a foundation. Medical care, housing, transportation, the basics. And we're doing it in a way that doesn't make her feel like we're pitying her. How do we do that? Bull asked. We tell her the truth that her husband saved my life, that this is a debt being paid, that in the Brotherhood you take care of your own and she's one of our own now because James was. Think she'll accept it? I don't know, but I'm going to try. At 6 o'clock, Alara's dinner shift started. She showed up on time wearing the same smile, moving a little slower now because the exhaustion was catching up. Rose pulled her aside before she started. Honey, those bikers are still in town. The ones from lunch. Alara looked surprised. They are staying at the Motel 6, asked about you, wanted to know if you were okay. Something flickered across Alara's face. Not quite trust, not quite hope, but something. Did they say what they wanted? Just wanted to make sure you were all right. Alara nodded slowly. She didn't know what to do with that information. Strangers caring about her, strangers who had no reason to care, except that her dead husband had once done something brave. It felt surreal. At 7 o'clock, Cole walked back into Sunrise Diner. Alone this time. The evening crowd was lighter. Families, couples, a few solo diners reading newspapers. He took a booth near the window. Alara saw him come in, hesitated, then walked over with a menu. Evening, she said. Coffee, please. She brought him a mug and the pot, poured carefully. Can I ask you something? Cole said quietly. Alara set the pot down. Of course. Would you sit with me for a minute? Just a minute. I know you're working. She glanced at Rose. The older woman nodded. Alara slid into the booth across from Cole, her hands folded in front of her on the table. I want to help you, Cole said. No preamble, no softening it. Alara's expression closed. I don't need charity. It's not charity, it's a debt. I don't understand. Cole took a breath. 17 years ago, your husband saved my life. He didn't have to. He could have stayed in cover, could have waited for the fire to die down. But he ran into a kill zone and pulled me out of a burning vehicle, and because of that, I got to live. He paused. I got 17 more years. I got to see my son graduate high school before he died. I got to hold my wife's hand when she passed. I got to ride with my brothers and see sunrises and drink coffee and do all the small things that make up a life. Another pause. James gave me that, and I never got to thank him. So I'm thanking you by helping, by making sure his child has what he needs, by making sure you're not alone. Alara's eyes filled with tears. I can't pay you back, she whispered. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to let me pay him back. She looked down at her hands, at the wedding ring she still wore, at the gift tags hanging against her chest. What kind of help? She asked quietly. Medical, housing, your car, whatever you need to get stable, to give you breathing room. I don't even know you. No, but I knew James, and that's enough. Elara was quiet for a long time. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Inside, the diner hummed with quiet conversation and the clink of silverware. Finally, she looked up. Okay, she said, but I want to know everything. No surprises, no secrets. If you're helping, I want to know how and why. Cole nodded. Fair. And I pay back what I can, when I can. If you insist. I do. Then we have a deal. They shook hands across the table. Her hand was small in his, but her grip was strong. Rose watched from behind the counter, and for the first time in months, she allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, things were going to be okay for Ellie Whitmore. That night after her shift ended at 11, Elara walked out to the parking lot to find Bull Thornton standing next to her Honda Civic. He had a flashlight and a notepad. Ma'am, he said, tipping an imaginary hat. Hope you don't mind. Cole asked me to take a look at your car, with your permission. Elara stopped. Right now, just a quick assessment. Won't take but a minute. She nodded, too tired to argue. Bull popped the hood and shined his light inside. After a moment, he whistled low. Transmission's about done. Brakes are shot. You're running on borrowed time here, ma'am. I know, I just can't afford to fix it right now. Bull closed the hood. What if you could? I can't. What if someone wanted to fix it as a favor? Elara looked at him. Why would you do that? Because your husband saved my president's life. Because you're carrying his child and trying to do right by him. Because it's what we do. I can't accept that. Bull smiled. It was a kind smile, the sort that crinkled the corners of his eyes. Ma'am, I'm a mechanic. I fix things. It's what I'm good at. Let me be good at what I do. For you, for James. Elara felt the tears coming again. She was so tired of crying. How much would it cost? She asked. Parts maybe $1,600. Labor's free. I don't have $1,600. Already taken care of. By who? By people who owe James Whitmore a debt. Let us pay it, ma'am, please. She looked at her car, at this man she'd just met, at the impossible kindness being offered. Okay, she whispered. Bull nodded. I'll start first thing tomorrow morning. Have it running smooth by tomorrow night. He walked away, leaving Elara standing in the parking lot, wondering what kind of world she'd stumbled into, where strangers became angels and debts from 17 years ago came due in the form of transmissions and brake pads. Thursday morning, Elara woke to find an envelope that had been slipped under her apartment door. Inside was a check for $12,000. The memo line read, Veterans Relief Fund, Survivor Support, no name, no return address. She stared at it for a full minute. $12,000. It was more money than she'd seen in one place since James died. It was enough to pay her back rent, enough to catch up on the IVF bills, enough to breathe. She called Rose. Did you have anything to do with this? She asked. With what, honey? There's a check, $12,000 from a veterans fund. Rose was quiet for a moment. Those bikers came through for you, didn't they? I think so, but I don't understand why. Because that's what good men do, Ellie. When they see someone who needs help and they have the means to give it, they help. Elara sat down on her bed, the check in her hand. I don't know what to say. Say thank you and let yourself be helped. It feels like too much. Honey, you've been carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders for 14 months. Let someone else help carry it for a while. James would want that. Elara closed her eyes. Yeah, he would. She deposited the check that afternoon, paid her landlord, called the IVF clinic, watched the numbers in her bank account shift from red to black for the first time in over a year. It felt like breathing after being underwater. That same afternoon, Bull and Hayes were in the diner parking lot working on her Honda. They had the car up on Jack's tools, spread out on a blanket, working with the efficient rhythm of men who'd done this 1,000 times before. Elara brought them sandwiches and iced tea. You don't have to do that, ma'am, Hayes said. Yes, I do, Elara replied. You're fixing my car. Least I can do is feed you. Bull smiled. Then we'll take the sandwiches. Thank you. She sat on the curb and watched them work. There was something calming about it. The methodical way they moved, the quiet competence, the occasional joke or curse when something didn't line up right. Can I ask you something? Alara said after a while. Yes, ma'am, Bull replied, not looking up from the transmission he was installing. Why are you really doing this? Bull set down his wrench and looked at her. My brother died in Vietnam, he said quietly. 1971. He was 19. I was 15. After he died, my family fell apart. My mom couldn't work. My dad drank. We were going to lose our house. He paused. A group of veterans from my brother's unit showed up one day, fixed our roof, paid 3 months of mortgage, left money for groceries. They said it was what my brother would have wanted. They said brothers take care of brothers even after they're gone. Bull picked up his wrench again. I've never forgotten that, and I swore that if I ever had the chance to be that for someone else, I would. Your husband was a Marine, a brother. This is what brothers do. Alara nodded, not trusting herself to speak. At 5 o'clock, Doc Palmer arrived with paperwork. Ma'am, I took the liberty of filling out your applications for VA benefits in OD survivor support. And all you need to do is sign and we can submit them. Alara looked at the forms. I didn't know I qualified. Most people don't. The system doesn't advertise, but you're entitled to full medical coverage through the VA and about $1,200 a month in survivor benefits. $1,200 a month. Yes, ma'am, it's not a fortune, but it'll help. Alara signed the forms with shaking hands. By sunset, her car was running smoothly. Bull started it up, and it purred like new. Transmission's in. Brakes are done. Tires are good. Oil changed. You're all set, ma'am. Alara stood there looking at her car, at these men who'd spent their entire day making sure she had reliable transportation. I don't know how to thank you, she said. You just did, Bull replied. That evening, the videos from Wednesday started going viral. 4 different angles of Victor Castellano slapping a pregnant waitress in a small-town diner. They'd been shared locally first. Cloverfield Facebook groups, county message boards. But by Thursday night, they jumped beyond local. A Nashville news station picked it up, then a regional affiliate. By Friday morning, the videos had 200,000 combined views, and people were angry. Victor Castellano woke Friday morning to 15 missed calls and 30 text messages. His lawyer, his business partners, the mayor of Cloverfield, all of them had seen the videos. The mayor's message was blunt: you need to make this go away. Victor's lawyer was more diplomatic, but equally clear. This is bad. We need to get ahead of it. By Friday afternoon, Victor had released a statement through his attorney. It expressed regret for an unfortunate incident, claimed it was a misunderstanding, and offered to make amends. The statement was picked apart on social media within minutes. People who'd had run-ins with Victor over the years started coming forward. A woman who said he'd harassed her at his car dealership. A business owner who claimed Victor had forced him out through intimidation. A former employee who described a toxic work environment. The dam was breaking, and Cole Kincaid watched it all from the motel room laptop, open Dalton sitting beside him. It's happening faster than I expected, Dalton said. Good. Men like Castellano rely on silence, on people being too scared to speak up. Well, Ellie spoke up, and now others are too. What do? We stay close, we keep Ellie safe, and we wait to see how he responds. You think he'll come after her? Cole's expression was grim. I think men like him don't like being embarrassed, and right now he's being embarrassed on a very public stage. So yes. They didn't have to wait long. Friday afternoon, Alara arrived at her apartment to find a new eviction notice on her door. 72 hours to vacate. She'd just paid her back rent the day before. She called her landlord. I'm sorry, Ms. Whitmore, he said. He sounded genuinely apologetic. But Mr. Castellano bought the building. He's the new owner, and he's exercising his right to terminate month-to-month leases. I just paid rent. I'll refund it, but you need to be out by Monday. Alara hung up and sat down on her apartment steps. 72 hours. She was 7 months pregnant, just getting her feet under her, and now this. She called Rose. He's retaliating, Rose said, anger sharp in her voice. That son of a bitch is retaliating. What do? You call Cole Kincaid. That's what you do. Alara hesitated. She'd accepted help with the medical bills, with the car, but this felt different. This felt like admitting she couldn't do it alone. Ellie, Rose said gently, James isn't here to help you, but his brothers are. Let them. Alara closed her eyes. Okay. She called the number Cole had given here. He answered on the second ring. Alara, he's evicting me, she said. Her voice was steady but barely. Victor bought my building, and he's giving me 72 hours. Silence on the other end. Then where are you right now? At my apartment. Stay there, I'm coming. He arrived 20 minutes later with all 5 of his brothers. They stood in her small apartment, these 6 large men making the space feel even smaller, and listened as she explained. Cole's jaw was tight. He's punishing you for speaking up, for the videos. I know. That's illegal. Retaliatory eviction. Proving it is another thing. Cole nodded. You're right, and by the time we could prove it in court, you'd be homeless. He turned to his brothers. We need to find her a place. Today, something safe, something he doesn't control. My church has a small apartment attached to, Reverend Barnesfeller said. It's used for visiting missionaries, but it's empty right now, 2 bedrooms. Clean, safe. She could stay there. Alara started to protest. I can't just live in a church apartment for free. It's not free. We charge rent, whatever you can afford. $1 a month if that's what works. That's basically free. That's what we have available. You can take it or look for something else. But Monday's coming fast. Alara looked around her apartment, at the boxes she hadn't unpacked since James died, at the life she'd been trying to hold together with duct tape and willpower. Okay, she said quietly. Thank you. We'll help you move, Bull said, this weekend. Get you settled before Monday. And just like that, it was decided. Friday afternoon, while Alara was working her shift at the diner, the 6 Iron Riders moved her belongings to the church apartment. It took them 3 hours. Everything she owned fit in the back of Bull's pickup truck and Hayes's van. They set up her bed, arranged her furniture, made sure everything was where she'd need it. When Alara arrived after her shift, the apartment was ready. Clean, organized, safe. She walked through the rooms, one hand on her belly, and tried not to cry. Cole was waiting in the small living room. It's not much, he said, but it's yours for as long as you need it. It's perfect, Alara whispered. She turned to him, this man who'd walked into her life 3 days ago and turned everything upside down in the best possible way. Why are you doing this? She asked. Really? Cole was quiet for a long moment. I lost my son, he said finally. Daniel, 19 years old, Fallujah 2007. Different unit than me. Different day than when James saved me. I was in Germany when it happened. Couldn't even be there. He paused. After Daniel died, I didn't see the point of much. I was alive because James pulled me out of that fire, but my son was dead, and I couldn't save him. It felt wrong, backward. Another pause. The Iron Riders saved me, gave me purpose, gave me brothers. But I've spent 17 years wondering why I got to live when my son didn't, why James saved me. He looked at Alara, and then I walked into that diner and saw you. Saw those dog tags, and I understood. James didn't save me for me. He saved me so I could be here, for this moment, for you, for his son. Cole's voice was rough now. So that's why I'm doing this, because this is why I'm still alive, to stand for you the way your husband stood for me. Alara crossed the room and hugged him. Cole stiffened for a moment, surprised, then carefully put his arms around her. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for being here. Always, Cole said quietly, for as long as you need us. And in that moment, in a small apartment attached to a church in Cloverfield, Tennessee, 2 broken people found something they'd both been missing. Purpose. Saturday morning arrived with the light that made everything look possible. Alara woke in her new apartment in a bed that wasn't hers, but felt safer than anywhere she'd slept in 14 months, and for the first time since James died, she didn't wake up afraid. The church apartment was small but clean. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with appliances that actually worked, a bathroom with water pressure that didn't fluctuate between scalding and freezing. The windows looked out over a small garden where someone had planted roses that were just starting to bloom. It was more than she'd had, more than she'd hoped for. She made coffee in a pot that Reverend Silas had left for her, along with a note that said simply, "Welcome home." Home. The word felt strange, She hadn't had a home since James died, just places she stayed, places she survived. But this felt different, like maybe possibly she could build something here. Her phone buzzed. A text from Cole. Doctor's appointment at VA hospital. 10 a.m. Doc Palmer will drive you. Don't argue. She smiled despite herself. She'd been about to argue. At 9:30, Doc Palmer knocked on her door. He was waiting in a clean pickup truck, country music playing low on the radio. Morning, ma'am, he said as she climbed in. You sleep okay? Better than I have in months. Good, that's good. They drove in comfortable silence for a while. The VA hospital was in Nashville, about 40 minutes away. The countryside rolled past green and gold in the morning sun. Can I ask you something, Ilara said after a while. Of course. How do you all know each other, the Iron Riders? You're all so different. Doc smiled. Cole started the Nashville chapter 15 years ago, after his wife died. He needed something, brotherhood, purpose. So he put out the word at the VA hospital at veterans centers, looking for riders who wanted to be part of something. He paused. We came from everywhere, different wars, different branches, different lives. But we all had one thing in common. We'd all lost something, and we were all looking for a way to make what we had left mean something. And you found it. We found each other, and yeah, that meant something. Still does. They arrived at the VA hospital just before 10. Dr. Patricia Nguyen was waiting, a woman in her early 40s with kind eyes and the efficient manner of someone who'd spent years navigating bureaucracy on behalf of people who needed help. Ms. Whitmore, she said, shaking Ilara's hand, Doc Palmer told me about your situation. I'm so sorry for your loss. Thank you. Let's make sure you and your baby get the care you need, shall we? The examination was thorough. Dr. Nguyen checked everything: blood pressure, baby's heartbeat, growth measurements. She asked questions about Ilara's health, her stress levels, her support system. The baby's healthy, Dr. Nguyen said finally. Strong heartbeat, good size for 7 months, but you're showing signs of exhaustion. High stress. Have you been taking care of yourself? Ilara looked down. I've been trying. I know. And I know it's hard, but you need to rest more. You're carrying a lot, literally and figuratively. She pulled up forms on her computer. I'm enrolling you in the VA prenatal program, full coverage. That includes all your appointments, delivery, and postpartum care. I'm also setting you up with a nutritionist and a counselor, both free through veteran survivor benefits. Ilara felt tears sting her eyes. I don't know what to say. Say you'll take care of yourself, for your baby, for James. I will, Dr. Nguyen smiled. Good. Now let's talk about your due date. December 18th, correct? Yes. That's less than 4 months away. We need to start preparing. Birth plan, hospital tour, childbirth classes. Are you doing this alone or do you have support? Ilara thought of Cole and his 5 brothers, of Rose, of the community that had formed around her in the span of a week. I have support, she said quietly. Good, because you're going to need it. The appointment lasted 2 hours. When they left, Ilara had a folder full of information, a schedule of upcoming appointments, and a prescription for prenatal vitamins that would be filled at no cost. Doc Palmer drove her back to Cloverfield, and she sat in the passenger seat feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. That afternoon, Cole called a meeting at Sunrise Diner. All 6 riders gathered in the corner booth, along with Rose and Ilara. We need to talk about what happens next, Cole said. With Victor? Rose asked. With everything. He's already retaliated once by evicting Ellie. He's not going to stop there. What can he do? Ilara asked. I don't live in one of his buildings anymore. I'm getting medical care through the VA. My car's fixed. What else can he take from me? Cole's expression was grim. Men like Victor don't think in terms of what they can take. They think in terms of what they can control. And right now, he's lost control of the narrative. Those videos made him look bad. Weak. He's going to want to reassert dominance. How? Bull asked. Could come at Ellie directly, could come at the diner, could come at us. Hard to say. So what do? Dalton asked. We stay visible. We make it clear Ellie's not alone, and we prepare for whatever comes. Prepare how? Hayes wanted to know. Cole pulled out the folder of documents they'd gotten from the county clerk. We find leverage. Victor owns half this county through shell companies and intimidation. But he's not untouchable. Nobody is. He spread the papers on the table. Property records, business filings, tax documents. Dalton and I have been digging. Victor's got his hands in a lot of pots. Real estate and construction, logistics. But he's cutting corners. Code violations on his properties. Workers being paid under the table. Suspicious contracts with the county. Reverend Silas leaned forward. You thinking about going to the authorities? Maybe. But first we need more. We need witnesses, people willing to talk. And we need to be smart about it because if he finds out we're digging, he'll bury the evidence. Rose spoke up. I know people he's hurt over the years. Business owners he's squeezed, tenants he's evicted. If you're looking for witnesses, I can help you find them. Do it, Cole said, quietly. We don't want him knowing what we're up to. Alara sat listening to all this, feeling overwhelmed. A week ago, she'd been a pregnant widow trying to survive. Now she was at the center of something that felt bigger than her, bigger than all of them. I don't want anyone getting hurt because of me, she said quietly. Cole looked at her. This isn't about you. This is about men like Victor. Men who think they can do whatever they want because they've got money and connections. Your husband died serving his country. You're carrying his child. You deserve better than to be slapped in a diner and evicted out of spite. He paused. We're not doing this because you asked. We're doing it because it's right. The table murmured agreement. Besides, Bull added with a grin, we're bikers. We don't scare easy. Sunday was quiet. The Iron Riders attended service at Reverend Silas's church. It was a small congregation, maybe 50 people, a place where everyone knew everyone, and newcomers were welcomed with genuine warmth. Alara sat in the front row feeling strangely at peace. She hadn't been to church since James's funeral, hadn't been able to face it. But sitting there listening to Silas preach about grace and second chances, she felt something inside her unclenching. After the service, the congregation held a potluck. Tables set up in the parking lot, food brought from home, kids running around playing tag. Alara sat at a picnic table, eating potato salad and listening to the Iron Riders tell stories. They were funny, these rough-looking men with their leather vests and gray beards. They told jokes, played with the children, helped elderly parishioners carry their dishes. She watched Cole lift a little girl onto his shoulders so she could reach the dessert table, and she thought about James, about what kind of father he would have been. He would have liked this, she said to Rose, who'd sat down beside her. James. Yeah, he always talked about community, about being part of something bigger than yourself. This is what he meant. Rose smiled. Then we'll make sure his son grows up knowing this, knowing what it means to be part of something good. That evening, as the sun set over Cloverfield, Alara sat in her new apartment and read James's journal, the one she'd been too afraid to open for 14 months. She started at the beginning, the entries from basic training, from his first deployment, from the day he'd met her at the VA hospital where she'd worked as a nurse. August 12th, 2009. Met a girl today. Alara. She's a nurse. She smiled at me and I forgot how to talk. I think she might be the reason I made it home. Alara touched the words with her fingers, feeling the indent of his pen on the paper. She kept reading, their courtship, their wedding, the quiet life they'd built together. And then she reached the entry from January 2023, 5 months before he died. January 10th, 2023. Ellie and I made a decision today. We're freezing my sperm, just in case. I don't like thinking about the what-ifs, but deployment taught me to prepare for worst-case scenarios. If something happens to me, I want her to have a choice. I want her to have a piece of me if she wants it. I hope she never needs it, but if she does, I hope it gives her something to hold on to. Alara's tears fell on the page, smudging the ink slightly. She turned to the last entry. June 10th, 2023. 5 days before the accident. Life is good, simple. Exactly what I wanted when I was in Iraq, wondering if I'd make it home. I have a wife I love, a job that pays the bills, a town that feels like home. If Sergeant Kincaid could see me, now married and happy, and building a life, I hope he'd be proud. Wherever he is, I hope he made it home too. I hope he got his simple life. Alara closed the journal and held it against her chest. He made it home, James, she whispered to the empty room. And he's here, helping us, taking care of your family. The baby kicked strong and insistent. She put her hand on her belly. Your daddy was a good man, the best man I ever knew, and you're going to know that. I promise. Monday morning, three things happened simultaneously. First, the videos of Victor slapping Alara crossed 500,000 views. A larger news outlet picked up the story. Suddenly, what had been a local scandal was becoming a regional one. Second, the county health inspector just showed up at Sunrise Diner with a surprise inspection. He found 6 violations, all of them minor, all of them fixable, and all of them suspiciously timed. Rose called Cole immediately. "He's coming after the diner now," she said, fury in her voice. "That inspector is in Victor's pocket. These violations are bogus. Can you fix them?" "Sure, but it'll cost money I don't have right now. And he'll just come back with more." "How much? 2,000, maybe 3. I'll cover it." "Cole, you can't keep paying for everything. Watch me." The third thing that happened was that Victor Castellano's lawyer called Cole directly. "Mr. Kincaid, my name is Robert Brennan. I represent Victor Castellano. My client would like to speak with you about resolving this situation." "What situation would that be?" Cole asked mildly. "The unfortunate incident at the diner. Mr. Castellano wishes to make amends by evicting the woman he slapped." A pause. "My client maintains that the eviction was a business decision unrelated to the incident." "Your client's a liar." Another pause, longer this time. "Mr. Kincaid, I strongly advise you to reconsider your position. Mr. Castellano is a powerful man in this county. He has resources, connections. It would be in everyone's best interest to resolve this amicably. Tell your client that if he comes near Alara Whitmore again, if he retaliates against her or the diner or anyone who helped her, those videos are going to be the least of his problems." "Are you threatening my client?" "I'm making a promise. 6 witnesses, counselor. We'll all swear to what we saw, and we'll make sure everyone knows what kind of man Victor Castellano really is." Cole hung up. Dalton, who'd been listening, whistled low. That was bold. That was necessary. Men like Victor respect force. Time to show him we're not backing down. That afternoon, Rose received a call from her insurance company. Someone had filed a claim saying they'd been injured at Sunrise Diner. The company was investigating. It was a lie. Rose knew it. Cole knew it. But it didn't matter. The investigation would tie up the diner in red tape for weeks. "He's escalating," Cole said when Rose told to him, "using every tool he has to pressure us." "What do? We escalate back." Cole made a call to a reporter he knew at the Nashville Tennessean, a woman named Jennifer Hayes who'd covered veteran issues for years. "Jennifer, it's Cole Kincaid. I've got a story for you." "I'm listening." "Victor Castellano, real estate developer in Cloverfield, slapped a pregnant military widow in a diner. Videos went viral. Now he's retaliating, evicting her, coming after the diner, using his connections to harass anyone who helped her." "And you have proof?" "I have videos, witnesses, documents showing he owns the building he evicted her from. Timelines showing the eviction came right after the videos went public." Jennifer was quiet for a moment. "Send me everything. I'll look into it. One more thing. The woman he slapped, her husband, was a Marine. Saved my life in Fallujah. She's pregnant with his child, conceived through IVF after he died. This isn't just about a slap. It's about a man using power to punish a widow for standing up to him." "Jesus, Cole." "Yeah. Send me everything. I'll have a story ready by Wednesday." Cole sent the files and sat back. The war had begun, and he was ready for it. Tuesday brought a development nobody expected. 4 women walked into the Cloverfield police station and filed reports against Victor Castellano. Jessica Brennan, a teacher who said Victor had harassed her at his car dealership in 2019. Amanda Pritchard, a bank teller, who said Victor had cornered her in a parking lot in 2021 and made unwanted advances. Lauren Hayes, a lawyer who said Victor had grabbed her at a county function in 2022. Nana Foster, a waitress at a different diner, who said Victor had harassed her repeatedly throughout 2023. All 4 had seen the videos of Alara. All 4 had decided that if she could stand up to him, so could they. Rose had helped organize them, had called them quietly one by one and said, "It's fine," and they'd agreed. Chief Brennan took the reports with a face like stone. He couldn't ignore 4 separate complaints. Not with the videos already public. Not with the media starting to pay attention. He called the county prosecutor's office. "We've got a problem," he said. By Wednesday morning, the Nashville Tennessean ran Jennifer Hayes' story. The headline read, "Local developer accused of assaulting pregnant widow, retaliating against supporters." The article was thorough. It detailed the slap, the videos, the eviction, the health inspection, the insurance claim, and it included statements from the four women who'd filed reports. Victor Castellano woke up to find his face on the front page of a major newspaper, and not in a good way. His phone started ringing immediately. Business partners, investors, the mayor, the county commission chairman. All of them had the same message: fix this now. But there was no fixing it. The story was out. The damage was done. By Wednesday afternoon, two of Victor's business partners had issued statements distancing themselves from him. A county contract his logistics company held was put under review. The car dealership saw protesters outside with signs that read, "Don't buy from bullies." Victor sat in his office watching his empire begin to crack and felt something he hadn't felt in 20 years. Fear. Thursday brought the court date for Alara's case. The county prosecutor had decided to move forward with assault charges based on the video evidence and witness statements. Victor showed up with his lawyer, Robert Brennan, wearing an expensive suit and a carefully neutral expression. Alara showed up with Cole and all five Iron Riders. They sat in the front row behind her, a wall of quiet support. The hearing was brief. The prosecutor presented the video evidence. Alara gave her statement calm and clear. The four women who'd filed their own reports sat in the gallery watching. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Patricia Morrison, watched the videos 3 times. Then she looked at Victor. "Mr. Castellano," she said, "I'm setting a trial date for 6 weeks from now. In the meantime, you're ordered to stay at least 500 feet away from Ms. Whitmore at all times. Violation will result in immediate arrest. Do you understand?" Victor's jaw was tight. "Yes, Your Honor." "Good, we're adjourned." Outside the courthouse, reporters were waiting. Alara walked past them with her head up, Cole and the riders forming a protective barrier around her. One reporter called out, "Ms. Whitmore, how do you feel about Mr. Castellano facing charges?" Alara stopped, turned. "I feel like justice is finally possible," she said. "Not just for me, for everyone he's hurt over the years." She walked to her car, got in, and drove away. The clip played on the evening news that night. A pregnant widow standing tall, refusing to be intimidated. People loved her, and they hated Victor Castellano even more. Over the next 2 weeks, Victor's world continued to crumble. A state investigation into his property management practices was opened. 4 more women came forward with harassment allegations. His wife filed for separation and moved out of their house. The man who'd controlled Cloverfield through fear and money found himself isolated, his power eroding like sand in the tide. And through it all, the Iron Riders stayed close to Alara. Bull finished repairs on the diner's kitchen, fixing the violations the inspector had cited. Hayes rewired the electrical system, making it safer and up to code. Doc drove Alara to her prenatal appointments, every single one. Reverend Silas organized a fundraiser at the church, raising $5,000 for Alara's baby supplies. Dalton set up a security system at her apartment just in case. And Cole just showed up every few days, checking in, making sure she was okay, sitting with her when the weight of everything got too heavy. "I don't know how to thank you," Alara said one evening. They were sitting in her small living room drinking tea, watching the sun set through the window. "You don't need to thank me," Cole said. "This is what James would have done, what any of us would do for family." "I'm not your family." Cole looked at her, his gray-blue eyes steady. "Yes, you are. The day James pulled me out of that fire, we became brothers. And brothers take care of each other's families. Always." Alara felt the tears coming again. She cried more in the past 3 weeks than in the previous 14 months. "I wish he could see this," she whispered. "See what you're doing, what you all are doing." "I think he does," Cole said quietly. "I think he sent us here." 6 weeks later, on a cold morning in October, Victor Castellano's trial began. The courthouse was packed. Media from 3 states. Supporters of Alara wearing purple ribbons. The 4 other women who'd filed complaints. The trial lasted 3 days. The prosecution presented the videos clear and undeniable. They called witnesses. The 4 customers who'd recorded everything. Rose Bellamy, who testified about the health inspection and insurance claim, the four women who'd filed their own reports, and they called Alara. She walked to the stand wearing a simple blue dress, 8 months pregnant, now moving carefully. She placed her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. The prosecutor's questions were straightforward. Ms. Whitmore, can you tell the court what happened on August 15th? And Alara told the truth. All of it. The harassment, the slap, the fear. Why didn't you fight back? The prosecutor asked. Because I'm 7 months pregnant and he's a powerful man. What was I supposed to do? What changed? Alara looked at the gallery at Cole and the 5 riders sitting in the front row. 6 men stood up, she said quietly. Men I didn't know, men who had no reason to help me except that my husband had once helped one of them. And I realized that if strangers could stand for me, I could stand for myself. The defense tried to poke holes, suggested she'd been disrespectful, suggested the slap was barely a tap. Alara didn't waver. He hit me in front of my customers, in front of children. And then he tried to make me homeless for speaking up about it. That's not a man who made a mistake. That's a man who thinks he's above consequences. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they came back, the 4 women stood. We find the defendant guilty of assault and battery. The courtroom erupted. Victor's face went white. His lawyer started talking about appeals. Judge Morrison banged her gavel. Order. Mr. Castellano, you're sentenced to 18 months in county jail, suspended to 6 months, with good behavior plus a $50,000 fine, 5 years probation, and mandatory anger management classes. You are also ordered to pay restitution to Ms. Whitmore in the amount of $15,000 for emotional distress and relocation costs. She paused. And let me be clear, if you violate the terms of your probation, if you retaliate against Ms. Whitmore or anyone who supported her in any way, you will serve the full 18 months. Do you understand? Victor nodded, his voice barely audible. Yes, Your Honor. Outside, Alara stood on the courthouse steps, Cole beside her, and faced the cameras. Justice isn't always loud, she said. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's just people standing up when it matters. I'm grateful to everyone who stood with me, who believed me, who showed me that I wasn't alone. She paused. My husband James taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right even when you're afraid. Today, justice was served, and I hope it gives courage to anyone else who's been hurt by someone more powerful than them. You're not alone. Stand up, speak up, and the world will stand with you. The clip played on every news station that night, and somewhere Cole Kincaid thought James Whitmore was smiling. December 18th arrived with the first snow of winter. Alara woke at 3 in the morning to contractions. Regular, strong, getting closer together. She called Cole. He answered on the first ring, voice instantly alert. Is it time? I think so. We're coming. 20 minutes later, a convoy of motorcycles pulled up outside the church apartment. In winter, in snow, 6 riders who'd promised to be there and were. Bull drove her to the hospital in his truck, Cole in the passenger seat, Alara in the back, with Doc Palmer monitoring her contractions. The others followed on their bike, snow be damned. At Vanderbilt Hospital, Dr. Nguyen was waiting. Let's have a baby, she said with a smile. Labor lasted 14 hours, long and hard and exhausting. But Alara wasn't alone. Rose was there, Doc Palmer was there, Dr. Nguyen was there. And in the waiting room, 5 bikers sat in chairs too small for them, drinking terrible hospital coffee, waiting. Cole paced. He'd been in combat. He'd been blown up. He'd buried his son and his wife. But waiting for this baby to be born was somehow harder than all of that. At 5:47 p.m., Dr. Nguyen came out. It's a boy, she said, smiling. 7 pounds, 6 ounces, healthy, strong lungs. Cole sat down, his legs suddenly weak. Can we see them? He asked. Give her a few minutes. Then yes. 20 minutes later, they filed into the hospital room. Alara was propped up in bed, exhausted but glowing, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a blue blanket. Everyone, she said softly, meet Cole Daniel Whitmore. Cole Kincaid, the man, stepped forward. His hands were shaking. May I? He asked. Alara nodded. Cole took the baby carefully, holding him like he was made of glass. The infant's eyes were closed, his tiny fist curled against his face. Hello, Cole, the man whispered. I'm your godfather, and I'm going to tell you all about your daddy, about how brave he was, how good he was, and how much he loved your mama. The baby yawned. Cole laughed a sound that was half sob. Yeah, kid, I know. Long day for all of us. He handed the baby to Bull, who held him with surprising gentleness for a man with mechanic's hands. Then to Hayes, to Doc, to Reverend Silas, to Dalton. Each man held the baby and made silent promises. To protect him, to teach him, to make sure he knew who his father was. Rose took her turn, last tears streaming down her face. Welcome to the world, little man, she whispered. You've got a whole family waiting to love you. 2 months later, on a clear February morning, old Daniel Whitmore was baptized. The church was packed. The entire congregation, the Iron Riders, the 4 women who testified against Victor, Deputy Rodriguez and half the police department, Jennifer Hayes from the Tennessean, people from all over Cloverfield who'd watched Alara's story and wanted to show support. Reverend Silas performed the ceremony. This child is born from love that transcends death, he said. His father saved a life 17 years ago. That man returned to save his son. That is the circle of honor. That is what it means to serve. Cole Kincaid and Rose Bellamy stood as godparents. Do you promise to guide this child in faith and love? Silas asked. I do, they said together. Silas poured water over baby Cole's head. The infant squirmed but didn't cry. I baptize you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Afterward, Cole the man gave a speech. I'm not this boy's father, he said, his voice carrying through the quiet church. I'm not family by blood, but his father, Sergeant James Bennett Whitmore, gave me 17 extra years of life. He paused. I promise before God and everyone here, I will make sure Cole Daniel Whitmore knows what kind of man his daddy was. And I will stand for this family as long as I draw breath. He presented Alara with a wooden box. Inside were James's dog tags, Cole's purple, heart photos of both men in uniform, and a letter. When he's old enough, Cole said, tell him his father saved men he never met, and those men came back to save him. There wasn't a dry eye in the church. 6 months later in August, exactly 1 year after the slap that changed everything, Sunrise Diner held a celebration. The corner booth, the one where 6 bikers had sat that fateful Wednesday, now bore a bronze plaque. In honor of Sergeant James Bennett Whitmore, USMC, a hero who never asked for thanks. Alara stood beside it, holding baby Cole, who was now 8 months old, and trying to grab everything in sight. The Iron Riders were there, of course. They came every month like clockwork, checked on Alara, held the baby, fixed whatever needed fixing. Rose had hired 2 new waitresses with money from the fundraiser. Alara now worked 3 days a week, enough to help but not exhaust herself. Rose had finally paid off the diner, buying it back at cost from a veteran-owned bank after Victor's properties were liquidated. Victor Castellano had served his 6 months and been released. Broke, divorced, alone. He'd moved 2 counties over and taken a job at a used car lot. Nobody in Cloverfield talked about him anymore. He'd become a cautionary tale, a reminder of what happened when power met accountability. The 4 women who'd stood with Alara had found their own strength. Jessica Brennan now ran a support group for survivors at the church. Amanda had been promoted to bank manager. Lauren opened her own law practice, specializing in harassment cases. Nina still worked as a waitress, but at a diner where the owner had her back. The diner was full. Regulars, newcomers, tourists who'd heard the story and wanted to see where it happened. Cole raised his coffee cup. To James Whitmore, he said, to the men and women who stand up, and to the people who remind us why we do. To James, everyone echoed. Alara looked around at the faces, at this community that had formed around her and her son, at these people who'd shown her that even in the darkest times there was light. She held baby Cole up to the plaque. That's your daddy, she whispered. He was the best of us. Baby Cole touched the bronze with his small hand, and for just a moment Alara felt James there, watching, proud. She smiled through her tears. That evening, after the celebration ended, Cole Kincaid sat on his motorcycle outside the diner. The sun was setting, painting the Tennessee sky in shades of orange and gold. Alara came out, baby Cole on her hip. You heading out? She asked. Yeah, gotta get back to Nashville, but I'll see you in a couple weeks. You always do. Cole smiled. Always will. He looked at the baby, who was gnawing on a teething ring and drooling contentedly. He looks like James, Cole said quietly. I know. More every day. That's good. That's how it should be. Alara stepped closer. Cole, I need you to know something. You didn't just save us financially. You saved me. You reminded me that I wasn't alone, that James's sacrifice meant something, that there are still good people in this world. Cole's throat was tight. I just did what any brother would do. No, you did more than that. You gave me back my life. She kissed his cheek. Thank you for everything. Cole nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He started his motorcycle, the engine rumbling to life. The other 5 riders started theirs. As they pulled out of the parking lot, Cole looked in his mirror. Alara was standing there waving baby Cole's hand in hers. He raised his hand one last time. And then he rode into the sunset knowing that somewhere James Whitmore was at peace. Because his family was safe. Because his son would grow up knowing what kind of man his father had been. Because 17 years after a young Marine ran into fire to save a stranger, that stranger had run back into the fire for him. The debt was paid. The circle was complete. And sometimes, if you listen closely on quiet Wednesday afternoons at Sunrise Diner in Cloverfield, Tennessee, you can still hear the sound of 6 motorcycles pulling into the parking lot. And you can still see a pregnant waitress who refused to stay down. And you can still feel the presence of a Marine who saved a life and never asked for thanks. Because some stories don't end. They just keep going, carried forward by the people who refuse to forget. And that is the story of what happened in that diner on a warm Wednesday afternoon. The story of courage and consequence, of debts that transcend death, of strangers who became family, and of a baby boy named Cole Daniel Whitmore who would grow up knowing that his father was a hero and that heroes never really die. They just live on in the people they save.